Okay, so we went ahead and started recording on this lecture. Again, the lecture is over the topic Express.JS and other topics. And so the outline or the objectives of the lecture, if you will, can be found on Inside Rankin on the home page where we kind of have this lecture outline. And again, this will be a code along, so I recommend go ahead and close whatever else you might be working on and return to that later so that you can code along and follow along. Okay, so Express.JS is the topic, so let's go ahead and just create a folder called Express Lecture, and let's go ahead and get that kind of opened up in Visual Studio Code. And this will be the folder that we get to write code in. Okay, so go ahead and do that. Now, to get into Express, we have to first understand what Express is. As far as Express is a package that we can incorporate into our projects. And so we have to understand what is a package, right? To understand Express is a package. Well, what is a package? JavaScript as a language is pretty awesome because, and the reason why it's so popular is because anybody can write a little bit of JavaScript. Anybody can write a module, if you will, and then put it online for other people to use. Okay, JavaScript in that sense is very open source. The opposite of that would be a language like C#. Now, Microsoft has kind of changed this where they have kind of made C# a little bit more open source in the sense that other developers can like make suggestions. But at the end of the day, Microsoft controls C#, and so the features that go into C# and like the new features and the new code sets that are built into the language, a lot of it's supported by Microsoft. And there are external packages in Microsoft, so I don't want to say, but the main code base maintained by Microsoft. JavaScript is just a little bit more, I guess, open to the public, it seems to me. Now again, maybe my comparison there isn't exactly the case because you can pull in external packages. So what is a package? Well, a package is something that is some JavaScript that someone else wrote. And so I want to invite us to all look at the web page, and we're going to use this web page a lot, so I'm going to recommend that you bookmark it. So if I kind of go here, npsjs.com. So everyone, if you would, go to npmjs.com and put this on your bookmarks, right, for this class. This website is the interface for us to kind of research what other JavaScript developers have written and built. Okay, and shows us how, and will show us how to bring in this code that other developers have written. Okay, so what you do is you go to this website and you search for a package, and then you have to bring that package into your project. And so the first package that we're going to learn to bring in is called Express. So go ahead and search for Express. Now, what happens behind the website is there's basically a database that is maintained full of packages. So behind npmjs.com, there's essentially a database full of packages, right, that we have available to download into our projects for us to use. So Express, if we just look at the, the definition here, Express is a fast, unopinionated, minimalist web framework for Node. A web framework is just a way to tie in a full stack application. Really, this framework is going to allow us to build on top of Node a web server. Okay, so if I were to kind of just like try and bring that definition down to what we might understand a little bit better, is Express will allow us to build a back-end web server. Remember, we got a front end and we got a back end. This back end is our application tier. It's our web server. So they very quickly show you how to bring in Express, which, remember, there's two ways on a JavaScript file to bring in resources. One's using the common modules, right? Common JavaScript modules, and one's using the ES modules, right? So when you're using const up at the top, that's using the common JavaScript, the old school way, right? But we're gonna learn how to bring it in using the newer ES modules, right? So up at the top here, they're using const, but remember, we're just gonna use require. So right off the top, I would say, import. We're gonna use import. So we're gonna actually not use this example exactly, but something similar. So, okay, npmjs.com, that's the website. Behind the website, you have a database. You might call that the registry. Right, so you can see this is a Node module. So Express runs on top of Node, which it's worth noting that Node, you don't have to use Express as your framework. I mean, in theory, you could code a web server without Express, just using Node. Like, you can manually build your own web server, but you don't have to. You could use Express, right? And Express is so popular, take a look at its weekly downloads, right? So part of the website, I would encourage us all to get familiar with the website, npmjs.com. And one of the first things you want to do is like look at what are the popular packages, right? You could tell if a package is popular by the number of weekly downloads. Okay, now 27 million is no small number, right? So if 27 million weekly downloads, I don't know how many developers are in the world, but 27 million is a big number, right? So this is a very frequently downloaded package. So this is so popular, it boils down to, can you just build your own web server? Yes, you could build your own web server, but why reinvent the wheel? They've got a tool that is, that is a mainline tool that other developers use. So I would not build my own web server. I would just use Express. When you kind of find a package, they're going to give you like the getting started, how to get started on this page here. Okay, so you can kind of scroll through here, and there's actually a lot of information on this page. But a lot of times this landing page for Express doesn't give you enough information. Okay, so a lot of times you need to go to the web page's documentation. So you're going to see Express.js.com. And you're going to need to reference the docs, probably in most cases, if you're doing some research on how to use a package. Okay, so again, getting started using a package is here. on the landing page, but oftentimes you need to go to that package's website and read the docs and practice using the website docs. You can also see the versions, right? So we kind of talk about the versioning system for 18.2. And you can kind of see the last time it was updated was about a year ago, right? So you can also see there's a lot of known issues. Okay, 128 known issues with Express. So that's a security concern. Okay, the more packages you bring in, the more, consider it windows of vulnerability, the more windows you're opening for attackers to get in. And so Express has some known issues. That's not going to prevent you from using a package necessarily. Okay, it's just something to be aware of. Okay, you bring in a package. That package is, it's going to have bugs. It's going to have issues. No software is perfect, right? So it's just something to be aware of, is that each package has some known issues. It's also worth noting up here, look at where my mouse is, 31 dependencies, right? So Express is a package, also known as a dependency. And so when we bring in Express, we are depending on Express to run our software. Well, Express runs on top of Node, and Express runs on top of 31 other packages. So by bringing in Express, we're bringing in really 31 additional packages. That's why there's probably so many known issues, right? Because any one of these dependencies can have an issue. Okay, so again, I'm just going through some of the basic, like what do you see on this landing page when you're looking at a package, and like what's the relevant data to us here. Okay, so we know that there's a website. We know what the website is. This website allows us to search for all the packages that are published on top of Node, right? These are all JavaScript packages for us to bring in. You could do a simple Google search, most popular NPM packages 2023, right? And I didn't pre-screen this. This is a list, and well, again, I didn't, the most popular package is Express. Okay, cool. That's the first one I'm introducing you to. Okay, and just to go through, there's other ones: Socket.io, GraphQL, Helmet, Node SAS, Lodash, Moment, Async, Bluebird. Okay, this is just one list, and these names don't mean much to you, but I will tell you throughout the course of this, throughout the duration of this course, we'll bring in a lot of these packages. Okay, just the ones that I've used and I plan on using in this course. We'll use Lodash, we'll use Moment, we'll use Express, we'll use Node SAS. So a lot of these popular packages we'll bring in on this course. Okay, and this is just, whatever. There's a bunch of lists of popular packages and what is a package and so on and so forth. Right, we'll bring in Axios. Okay. So the next thing is NPM. I guess we could have started with, it used to stand for Node Package Manager, NPM, and it's a command line command. Okay, NPM is a command line command that allows you to help you manage your packages. Okay. I don't think it stands for actually Node Package Manager anymore. I think that actually has changed. If I'm not mistaken, it doesn't stand for Node Package Manager anymore, or I don't know. See again, NPM is a package manager for the JavaScript programming language and maintained by NPM. NPM is the default package manager for the JavaScript runtime environment Node. It consists of a command line client, also called NPM, an online database of packages called the registry. We talked about all that, right? So NPM has a client, aka the command line. I guess what I was looking for here is that it doesn't actually stand for Node Package Manager anymore, but I guess I'm just making that up in my head, which is fine. To define it as Node Package Manager, I mean, that's what it is. I thought it had a different name, and apparently I'm making that up, so no big deal. Node Package Manager. Okay, so let's talk about the three parts, right? Part one's the website. You got the URL, npmjs.com. Hopefully you got it on favorites. Part two is the registry. The registry is also known as the database. The database is the, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of packages that are available for you to download and bring into your project. Okay, so you got the website, you got the registry, and then you have the client. The client is the command line command. Okay, the command line command that you can go to inside of a terminal. If you go new terminal, type in npm, you should see that it is a understood command by your terminal, right? So can everyone go ahead and just type in the word npm in your terminal, and you can kind of see some of the different what you could call variations of the npm command. You might also call these switches, right? So npm install is the first one. If you just type the word npm, has everyone got that? Everyone's got npm. When you install Node, you get npm. You got so npm install is a very common command. Okay, npm install is so common. npm install is so common. I mean, what do you think that's going to do? That's going to install a package. So how do we install Express? Well, npm install Express. Okay, very simple command. npm install Express. It's such a common command that when you go to the docs and you go to, you look up a package, so npm.js, and you search for Express. Okay, to install, they give you the shorthand, npm I. Well, I represents the word install. So npm I Express is shorthand for npm install Express. I mean, are we lazy or what? We don't even want to type the full word install. Okay, you could say that's lazy. You could say that's efficient, right? Maybe I'm going to say we are very efficient. We like concise code. So let's go ahead and run npm I Express. Hold up a second before we do that command. Okay. Because I'm going to do another command first, which is npm init. Now notice here's all commands, and let's see, there's init, right? So I'm going to run this npm init command, right? So I just typed in the word npm. I got a bunch of commands to install npm. So I'm going to do npm init. Right, this is the first command that I'm going to have you guys run, so go ahead and type in npm init. And this will create a file for us called package.json. Okay, package.json is a settings file, right? On any website, you guys have a profile on. You have like profile settings, right? So this is a settings file for your project. All right, So if you're taking notes, that's a good one, right? npm init is a command for a settings file, for creating a settings file for your project. Now, when you just type in npm init, it kind of has an interactive mode. So it's going to ask you questions that you're going to answer in an interactive way, and it will create this settings file. Okay, so let's do this. Now, what is your package name? What is your project name, if you will? By default, it's in parentheses, it's Express Lecture. That's obviously the name of the folder that you're in. So I'm just going to hit enter, and that will assume the name Express Lecture. Okay, so you can kind of see what's in there in the parentheses is the default, right? The versioning system, if this is a software that you're creating, version 1 is fine by me. So I'm going to hit enter. This is a paragraph description, again, in interactive mode. This is a demo project for learning Express and NPM. Go ahead and hit enter on that. Okay, entry point. This is the name of the first file that all software needs an entry point. Like, this is the start line. Where should your software start running? What's the name of the file? And in this case, they recommend index.js. I've also seen server.js. Doesn't matter, you could go either way. What's the name of your JavaScript file? Sure, let's just take index.js. Okay, again, I often see server.js, but let's just say index.js. Yes?
Will it work if it's an MJS file?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Question was, will it work if it's an MJS file? And the answer is yes. Okay, test command, I'm going to leave that one blank. That would be to run like tests, like unit tests against your software. We're not running any sort of testing against our software, unit testing yet. So I'm just going to leave that one blank. Okay. If there's a Git repo associated with it, right now there's not. So we can leave that blank. Keywords. Yes.
As far as the Git repo thing, if you do add one eventually, do you have to like go back?
You can always modify this later.
Okay, just doing the same command
Let me show you how to do it. It's real simple. Once you run the setup file, it's going to create a file,
and you can go
and then you just go into that file. Yep, good question. It's also worth noting if you create a repo first on GitHub and then you clone it, I'm pretty sure that this command is smart enough to pick up the repository URI, if you will. Okay. Keywords. This is if you want to publish this package on the npm.js registry. Okay, if you actually want to take your package and publish it and get it into the registry, get it into the database, and you want to say, hey, allow a user to search for whatever, and that would be a keyword that my package could be found under. Okay. You want your keywords to be relevant to the project. You know, I'm not going to publish this on the registry, so I'm just going to leave this blank. But just realize that this is like SEO going on here, right? SEO keywords. What words do you want to be found under when you search for this package? Author, we're going to put our name. Okay. I've had students put their name before and then get caught cheating because when they copy someone else's code, they're not even smart enough to change the author. If you're going to cheat, I mean, don't be that. I'm not teaching you how to cheat. I'm just teaching you how to use common sense.
Remember, it's not cheating. You don't.
License. We typically go with like the MIT open source license. That basically says that you can use this. Like, I made it, and you're free to use it however you want. Okay. And notice what it creates. is a JSON, right? JavaScript object notation, object, right? So we got an object here. And is this okay? I'll say sure. Okay, and it made this file, package.json. Okay, so kind of like getting started, right? The first thing that I'm going to recommend in this process on any new project that you do, this is the first command that I would recommend you run, an npm init. That's going to get this package.json, and that is going to be our starting point. Now, Tony says, hey, I want to use an MJS, right? Because I want to use the newer module system. Okay? One thing that could be helpful here, if I did not want to have to specify the M for the MJS, I can add this type of module, and then that's going to assume that all my .js files are compatible with the new ES modules. Okay, so go ahead and run the npm init, step 1, and then step 2, go ahead and add this. Now this file is pretty flexible about where you put this type key, right? This is called the key and the value. The key is the type key and the value is module. So you don't exactly have to put it right here, but I've always put it right here, so I just feel comfortable putting it right there. So I'm going to put it right there. If you want to put it somewhere else, that should be okay. Okay, and then that way, to Tony's point, I can just do index.js, okay, and I can use the newer import syntax and it would work. Okay, you cannot use the newer syntax without doing this type of module, unless you do a .mjs. But if you don't want to put the M there, if you just want it to be a .js file, then you have to do the type of module. Cool? Clear as mud? Got it. All right. Now, we have a package.json. Now, that interactive mode is actually what I would recommend. Don't do this, right? Don't follow my lead here, but I'm just going to delete this file, and I'm going to do this over. Now I'm going to do npm init, and I believe it's a /y, and it just it accepts all the defaults. So here, if I just do the /y, it's not the interactive mode. It just accepts all the defaults, and it creates a package JSON, and then you could just come into this package JSON, and really what did I change? I changed the description. This is a lecture on Express, cool. And I added a type of module, and I made myself the author. And so you can very much so just manually, or skip the interactive mode and just go into the file and make the changes manually, and that's a little bit faster. If you want to do that, that's fine. Okay. So this is a settings file, and this is where I would recommend anyone start, right, with a package.json. And it's worth noting this is a pretty simple package.json. They get pretty lengthy and pretty complex the more complex your software. So this is a pretty simple package JSON. Okay. While we're on the website, let's take a look at a couple other packages. One package that I'll have us look up is called NodeMon. Go ahead and do a search for NodeMon. Yes, sir.
We haven't installed the Express yet.
Nope, we haven't installed Express. Nope. very simple description. NodeMon is a tool that helps develop Node applications by automatically restarting the application when a file changes in the directory that is detected. Okay, so what is Express? Express is a server. If you make a change to your server, you need to reboot the server. Okay? Stopping the server and restarting it, it's not hard. But NodeMon does that automatically. If you make a change to your server and you're running NodeMon, your server just reboots if you're using NodeMon. So it's more automatic and there's no more manual process. Right? So NodeMon is uber helpful when you're developing backends because you're not constantly rebooting your server. It just kind of handles it automatically. Okay, so if we're just looking at some common packages that we're going to be bringing in very soon, Express is one, NodeMon is another. We haven't brought in either. Another one we're going to bring in is .env. This is a very, very popular very popular way to essentially have global variables. Okay, when you have variables that kind of need to be accessible across multiple parts of your application, we're going to learn how to store these variables in a file called the .env. .env standing for environment variables. Okay. If you guys are familiar or not with environment variables, I'm going to invite you into the Windows world, right? So everyone knows I'm on Windows 11. And if I type in the word environment, you can see that there are system environment variables in Windows. And if I click on that, it'll bring up the system properties with environment variables. And here we have all sorts of variable names that are configured for Windows to use in different places. Okay, maybe at the command prompt, maybe, I don't know, maybe other places, right? So the point is these variables, here and here, there's a variable called OS, there's a variable called temp, there's a variable called windir. There's all these different variables that you can use in your Windows system. Okay, and these are recognized across your entire OS. If you want a variable in the Node world to be very, globally scoped, if you will, is how I think of it, you're going to put that variable in a .env file. Now, in the latest version of Node, this is very like this week, right? I was kind of geeking out on like the latest features of Node, and in the latest features of Node, they actually have now built into Node their own environment variable method. So this package may someday be phased out because now kind of built into Node there's a way to have environment variables. You don't need a third-party package. Okay, but for this class, that feature, I think it's not even. Remember on Node.js, it's over here in this 26, right? The latest features. It's not here. That's back in the stable build. 1817 is essentially your stable build. 26 is all the new stuff, but it's not exactly stable yet. Okay, so we're not going to bring it into this class because I'm not going to bring in non-stable code, right? Although you can tinker with it and get some of the latest features. Point is, .env may be phased out someday. Okay, there's a debug package. Debug is okay. Everyone's familiar with Notepad. Everyone's familiar with Notepad++, right? Yeah. Notepad versus Notepad++, right? Notepad++, you get like color coordinating, color coordinating. Notepads, everything's black and white. Okay, in Notepad++, like you get keywords that are blue, and attributes that are red. And so you get some, based on the code that you write, you get some color coordination going on, right? This is a console log. This is like the new console log. Console log is a debugging tool, right? Like you use console logs to kind of help you write JavaScript. Debug is the newer console log. Okay, so we're gonna, and you can kind of see here, what do we got going on? We got these different colors and we got these different names of different workers. And so this is the Notepad++ version of Notepad for console log. This is a newer console log. So we talked about NodeMon, we talked about .env, we talked about debug, and we talked about Express. Okay, let's start coding. That's a lot of theory. Let's start with Express. Now, the quickest way is with our shorthand command, npm I express. But because, if I clear the screen here, let me close my package.json. And I'm going to type in npm install express. Or if you just want to do npm I express, that works just as well. All right, I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to spin for a little bit. Actually, that's pretty fast. Notice a couple of things. Now we have a new folder called Node Modules. Remember I said Express had a bunch of other dependencies? Here they are. These are all the other dependencies. Just by bringing in Express, we're bringing in all of these JavaScript dependencies. So inside of any one of these, we've got a JavaScript file. Okay, and Express needs this to run. Okay, but Node Modules is oftentimes, it ends up being a lot of, it's a big folder to download. Because Node Modules ends up being like a sizable download, when you copy your source code to GitHub, it does not, if you have a node gitignore file, it does not copy up Node Modules. Okay, Node Modules is not copied up to GitHub. Everyone hear me there? Node Modules is not copied up to GitHub. So here's a scenario that's very real and probably going to be very real to you guys. Okay, you're writing an application, you're building an application, and you're on two different computers. Okay, you got your work laptop and you got your desktop at home or whatever. And you're using GitHub to kind of port the code from, you know, pushing and pulling, and so your repos on github.com. When you basically commit and push your repo to github.com, and then you clone that repo onto another computer, Node Modules will not be there. Therefore, nothing will work on the other computer when you do a clone. Okay, very simply, to get Node Modules to bring in all the dependencies that need to be there, you just have to run the install command. You have to run npm install or npm I. By running npm install, here's what it does. It goes into your package.json. Take a look now at something new that we have. We now see that there is a dependency of Express for our application. When you run this npm install command, it's going to go inside your package.json, it's going to see what dependencies you have, and then it's going to download those dependencies into Node Modules on your other computer, right? So the more dependencies you have, running this npm install command, you know, the more dependencies it will download, right? The more packages it will download. All right. Now notice my main file is index.js. and let's open up index.js. Okay, so all we've done is we've brought in Express. So we're going to build our first web server, okay, using the import syntax. So now that we've installed Express, we're allowed to import it. So this is an object. This is an object. This object is called Express. Okay? And I say it's an object, but looks like it's just a method, right? So this is an Express method. We call the method and store the results of that in a variable called app. So this is I'm trying to just bare bones this, right? What is the minimum needed, kind of like an HTML template? What is a minimum needed file to do like hello world? And I'm going to talk about this code, but this is hello world. We're going to talk about these different pieces. We're going to talk about what a web server actually is, to talk about, you know, some of these different objects. Notice here we have an app.get. Get is a keyword that is a HTTP method. Okay, we got to talk about different HTTP methods. There's a get method, which is getting a resource. It's a get request, right? So you get, there's get, there's put, there's post, there's puts. I already said puts, there's deletes. Okay, there's different methods built into HTTP. And this is saying, hey, when our web server called app gets a HTTP GET request for the home page, which is just a /, I want you to send back a string of text that says hello world. And then we need to essentially build in this is an event listener. We need to listen for that request by doing app.listen port 3000, and when we hit this, let me minimize my terminal, kind of get this all on one screen. Give you guys a second to type that up. Okay, so bare bones, if we can talk about this a little bit more, I think I've covered it, but here, you know, this is a newer syntax for bringing in a method. This is basically looking in the Express package in our node modules. Okay, so obviously this is bringing in a method from node modules. We call that method and store the results in a variable. That variable then has methods like get and listen. Okay, so we made this object called app, and app has methods one called get and one called listen. Get says, hey, when you get a request for a route, then respond with the word hello world. And so this is called a route. And so one major part of Express is routing, right? What are the different routes that when you go to different URLs, essentially, when you go to different URIs, they call them, whatever, same difference. When you go to a URL, you go to a URI, how does the backend respond? And then you need an event listener. You basically need to, this basically boots up the server. Okay, so now how do I run this? Well, we know with the node command, we can run a JavaScript file. So I'm going to say node index.js. And you could see when I run node index.js, look, it did a console log, server started on port 3000. And okay, that's cool. And notice it's like, you get the little cursor here. That means that it's running. Normally, if I go to Task Manager at this point, and normally I should be able to kind of scroll down and get like a node, if I can find it, a node process. And I'm not seeing it, but it should. Oh, maybe it's there. No. Anybody else seeing this? I don't know. Sometimes I see it, sometimes I don't, honestly.
You press the number, like click on one and then hit N on the keyboard, it should take you to the end.
Right. It's not. Anyways, it's not important. So let's test it, right? So let's go in our browser. I'm going to type in http://localhost 3000. We get back hello world. Okay, pretty simple, not doing a whole lot, but that's how you start, right? We start by doing hello world. The fact is we hit a route. Now there's an assumed slash here, right? So you can assume the slash. That is the home route. Okay? And this is a GET request, HTTP GET for home. Now in here, notice two objects. Two parameters, request and response. So you're going to notice inside of my parameters, right? This is an anonymous function that runs when you hit the home route. Okay, this anonymous function right here, when you has two parameters. A REQ, obviously that's the request object, and a RES for response. This syntax is very common on our routes. We often see REQ, we often see RES, and sometimes you see a third one called next, and I'll talk about that when we get there. But for right now, we'll just keep it for these two. Okay. It's pretty basic that you have a client and you have a server. The client is making a request. So, imagine two computers. You have a client computer and a server computer, and the client says, with HTTP, I want to get whatever your server is going to give me at the home route. So when data comes into the server, that data would be contained in the request object, right? So I would say data coming from the client is request, is the request object. Notice we're not using the request object in any way yet. We will use the request object, we're just not yet. Data we send back to the client is the response object. Those are what those two parameters represent, request and response. When we get data coming into our server, it's coming in via request object. And when we want to send something back, we send it back via the res, the response object. Now notice what we're doing, res.send. We're sending data back to the client with the response object. Now, real quick, I talk about various HTTP methods, right? We could talk about the different methods real quick. There's a get method. Notice right here, app.get. Okay, this is when a client says, hey, I'm requesting a resource. You're running a get method. There's a post. What do you think a post is? What do you think a post is? We've heard this terminology before. Think of HTML. What's a post?
Oh, it's like a form submission.
Yeah, I should even say it in here, but maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. You're exactly right. A post is a form submission, right? You have a web form, you're registering a new user, you're purchasing an item in a shopping cart, you're registering for a newsletter, right? You click that submit button, that's a post. Delete would be in the CRUD world. You know what delete is you're actually removing something out of a database. Put is oftentimes used for the update. So you want to update something in your database, you want to update something, you would use a put method. Okay, so these are some of the basic HTTP methods that we'll be using here. There's app.delete, there's app.put, there's app.post, so on and so forth. Those are all different methods that belong to app. Okay, now notice how we did this. Server started on port 3000 and then we had to kind of manually type this in, right? And that's fine, but I want to upgrade that a little bit, right? I want to upgrade that process. And I'm going to do this by, instead of single quotes, I'm just going to do backticks. I'm going to say server running at HTTP, and I'm going to if I do that. Now notice my server is still running. Remember that nodemon I said, hey, it's going to reboot my server for me? Right now I don't have nodemon running, so I have to hit Control-C because I made a change to my source code. I have to hit Control-C here. Notice it stops my server from running. And I have to run my command again, node index.js. Now, if I hover my mouse and I can Control-click, and it boots it's a clickable link now. So yeah, I'm going to do that again. So what I did is I just hold down Control-C at the terminal, and that stops my server from running. And then I hit the up arrow to run node and run my server again. Now, a little bit, I've upgraded this process because I can control, if I hold down Control, now this is a link, I can click this link, it opens it up in a browser, I don't have to type this in. Okay? So that's a little bit nicer, right? So if I were to upgrade that, I would do that. I can send back like a string of text like this, or I could send back off of res. Notice there's a JSON method. And I can send back some JSON data. Now here's the tie-in that I want to give you. Remember we had a JSON file that we just kind of manually used the fetch API to extract data out of and then display it in the front end? You can use a response object to send back some JSON from a back end. And now we're kind of simulating a back end that's going to retrieve some data and send back some JSON that could be used on the front end however you choose. And then maybe we just say, user name and you know, it doesn't really matter. Age of okay, again, this is kind of annoying. I have to stop my server, Control C, press the up arrow and reboot it. Hold down Control C, and now I send some JSON data to my front end. By the way, does yours look like this? See how mine's nice and formatted? Yours does not look like this? Okay, let's take a look. All right. Express has 3 parts to be familiar with. Part 1, well, middleware is one of them, but I would say part 1 is routing. 2, middleware. 3, templating or view engine. So we're going to talk about each, more or less, and that's where we're going. And so let's start with routing. Let's do this. Let's do another method, create another route. So let's do app.get, sure, about. We now have 2 routes. So you could see that routes are kind of determined by this string right here. And this is a back-end route. When we get into working with a front-end framework, there are also front-end routes. But routes are just modifying your URL so that when the user navigates to a back-end route or a front-end route, that it responds with a resource. Okay, now again, we've modified our server by creating another route. And so I need to close the server. You can kind of see this is a pain in the butt, and reboot it. And then I can control click on localhost. By default, it kind of takes me here, which is my home route, but if I type in /about, you get an about page. Okay, so this is a back-end route. You could see that there are different routes. And that is part number 1. When I refer to routing, I'm just saying, hey, give a URL, and at these different back-end routes, you're going to do different things. I mean, you might request different resources. So, you know, think of CRUD operations here. You have different routes for each operation. You can have a route for create. You can have a route for read. You can have a route for update. You can have a route for delete. All sorts of back-end routes it will create. And when you start having a bunch of routes, like here's 2 different routes, you know, a website or a back-end might have a whole bunch of different routes. So pretty quickly we'll learn to extract these routes out into their own JavaScript modules, into their own files, so that you don't bog down your home page with like 100 different routes. Okay? So that kind of just follows this principle of like keeping your code clean by taking out, you know, different pieces and putting them in their own units of you know, file units. Okay, so Express has routes, and we will we'll be creating a bunch of different routes and doing a bunch of different things with our back-end routes. So you can go to the about page, to the home page. Okay. Now this is just kind of how the browser, by the way, you know, when you send it a string, it just displays it here. Really, I don't even think there's any, it's just right raw in the HTML body tag. There's no paragraph tag there. There's no there's really no front end, like there's no headings, there's no H1s or paragraphs or any HTML tags. Okay, so when you just send a string of text, that's just really sloppy. And when you send, some JSON, it kind of, I have an extension called JSON formatter, and so it did kind of put it in some, using this extension, it did put some span tags in there to kind of display this content. But that's because I have an extension. If I go to my Chrome extensions, and you can optionally install this JSON formatter, right? If you want to kind of have a different format in Chrome, you could use this JSON formatter, and at least that's what's adding this markup here. Otherwise, probably you guys might see different results if you don't have that. You probably see it like this in this raw form. Okay, whatever. That's what's getting it to display like that. So we have routes, and that's one part of Express, routing. Then we have middleware. And middleware are the, functions. I would write it differently. Functions that execute between the request and the response. It's a weird term, kind of, but it's not, because it does describe what it is. Middleware are functions that run between the client request and the server response. So obviously the client makes an HTTP request. It might be to get a resource or to post some data. And then the server is going to respond how it responds, and that's a whole life cycle. Request response. Middleware are just functions that run between that time. In the lecture, you can kind of see a visual of that. Is that you get the incoming client request, and then you get a bunch of different functions that run. Now this represents 3 different middleware functions. Call it function 1, function 2, function 3. And then ultimately the response sent back from the server. Okay? So middleware is just a term for running functions in between request and response. It's a little bit more than that, but that's where you start. That's where my comprehension starts. And when I say it's a little bit more than that, you are going to see in here, there's this keyword next. When you reach the end, call this first middleware, call that function 1. When you reach the end of function 1, you need to call the next method to then call function 2. So for one middleware to call the next middleware in the chain, in the function chain, you run this method called next. So for one function to call the next middleware function, you just run this function called next. And I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into middleware functions. Probably not right now, but I will dive deeper into middleware functions. Read the technical definition. Middleware literally means anything you put in the middle of a layer of software and another. Express middleware are functions that execute during the life cycle of a request to the Express server. Each middleware has access to the request and response for each route it is attached to. So that's a key feature of middleware. A key feature of middleware is that it can modify the rec and res objects. So here is a route. We have an incoming request and we have an outgoing response. And middleware can modify those objects. And we'll see as this class goes on how that's used. Okay. All right. Let's bring in another package. Okay. As we're going about this, I am immediately annoyed by having to manually reboot my server. So I kind of talked about NodeMon. So let's bring in NodeMon. Let's search for NodeMon. And let's get to this cool logo. Gotta love the little monster logo there. And we could see that this has 5 million weekly downloads, so that's certainly a lot. And let's install NodeMon globally. And so what's nice about installing it globally, notice this switch npm install -g. So as we're going through NPM, we know NPM install, we know NPM init. These are commands we've learned. We've used this. So this is still an NPM install command. We've got a new switch, -g, lowercase g. Lowercase g means that you can install this once and then it's kind of just available on your terminal. You don't have to install it on each project. Okay? So this is a very important command to run one time, so please everyone follow along. Let's go to this. Let's run this npm install -g NodeMon. Okay, so I'm going to close this terminal, Control-C, and I'm going to type this command. Okay, again, a global install means you don't have to install it on each project. You just install it once. It is then a command. This NodeMon command would be available to the terminal. I'm going to hit enter. Now I've installed NodeMon before, so I don't know how this is going to respond. Your mileage may vary. So let's click on enter. And it seems to have added 2 packages, removed 2 packages, changed 31 packages in 2 seconds. And there you go. So now let's just kind of see. If I go back to my file explorer, package.json, notice because I installed it globally, it does not add a dependency here. Okay, but let's do this. I'm gonna run, now I should be able to run NodeMon. Instead of running node index.js, I'm gonna run NodeMon index.js. And notice I get this kind of, I get NodeMon running instead of node running. And you guys should get this. Are you guys getting this? Some saying yes. How many people got it? Raise your hands, yes. How many people are not? Raise your hand, no. Okay, let's take a look. Okay, this is a common thing. Not everyone has it, but I'm gonna have Connor do a screen share on Discord because I just need someone with this error because many people have this error with NodeMon. So I'm gonna stop my screen share on Discord and I'm going to stream Connor's. Connor, you know how to do a screen share, yeah?
Yeah, but it says I'm not allowed to stream into this channel.
So I need to add you as a student, so let's do that. So I'm gonna add Connor as a right click. Let's add the role of ranking students. Okay, now Connor, try now.
Yeah, let me get this one.
All right, Connor, go ahead, everyone, hop on Connor's stream. I'm gonna pull it over onto my recording. Whoops. Okay, I am now watching Connor's stream on Discord. Okay, so this is an error, and you can kind of read about the error. And what's really nice about it is it says read about this error at https://go-microsoft.com. So that's the URL. So Connor, can you copy that URL for me? The entire URL. And actually, if you click it, if you hold down Control, can you click it?
Yep.
Okay. And then let's. Are you streaming your whole screen, or are you just
I'm streaming specifically this.
Okay. Can
Do
you
want the full
can you do the full screen? As long as it's you don't have any crazy content up on the screen that you're not supposed to.
thing? I do.
No crazy message boards or anything like that.
No.
Right
Just
on.
some QAnon stuff.
Yeah, no QAnon stuff,
Government
please.
Secrets, Minecraft Discord.
No, I don't play War Thunder. I don't leak up.
All right, let's stay focused here. Let's
I thought it was Minecraft.
Hold on.
The Discord server that you link like a bunch of classified information.
just go ahead and stream the whole screen, can you?
What?
Yeah, here we go. Screen 1.
No, there was one particular. It was
Okay,
about
that
Ukraine and
should
like.
do it.
Okay, so do you have that? Can you open up that link in the URL?
I will attempt to do so.
Yeah, the War Thunder thing. Yeah, I did that.
Everyone who's getting this error needs to follow Connor's example. You got an extra dot at the end there.
Yeah, I got rid of it.
Okay, and for the sake of that, can you just post that URL in the Discord channel?
Yeah.
Okay, while basically this is a Windows permissions thing. You gotta basically give it permission in Windows to run this command.
Alright, that's the. Let me do this one instead. There we go.
Did you paste that in there?
Yeah.
Okay, is everybody on this screen that has this error? Okay. Okay, so we're gonna change, Nathan.
Mine says that your node one is not recognized.
Did you install node mod? Okay, as Connor's doing, he's kind of scrolling this article. So let's scroll down. Scroll down. Execution policies, all signed, scroll down. Bypass, remote signed. Scroll down. Execution policy scope. Scroll down. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Hold on. Get execution policy. Scroll down. Hang tight there. Hold on. Get execution policy. Nope. There we go. Okay, we're getting close. Scroll down. For example, there we go. Okay, hold on. So the command I'm looking at here is the PowerShell set execution policy minus execution policy remote signed. So everyone needs to scroll down on this article to that code block and go ahead and click on the copy button, Connor. Okay. So everyone get to that copy. Has everyone copied that? Everyone's following along. No one's zoning out on me? Okay. We're actually not going back to the terminals. Connor, go ahead and go to your desktop for me. Everyone go to your desktop. I want you to type in the word PowerShell. P-O-W-E-R. Do not click it. Do not click Windows PowerShell. But do you see the Run as Administrator?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and click on Run as Administrator. Connor's screen went black, but there it popped up.
It was asking me if I wanted to allow this.
Okay. Did everyone allow this? Does everyone have this PowerShell terminal?
Do
Okay.
we do this even if we don't have the error?
Do you do that even if you don't have the error? I think you're okay if you don't have the error. If in fact you do have the error in the future, you'll need to do this. And I can walk you through that then. Connor, just go ahead and right click, because that should paste. And hit enter. Now it says the execution policy helps protect you from scripts you do not trust. Changing the policy might expose you to some risk. Type in the capital letter A for yes to all. And hit enter. And type in the word exit, you are done. Okay. Connor, now go back, hit the up arrow. Yahoo! We are fixed. So let's check out NodeMon. So NodeMon, notice it says, hey, anytime you make a change to a file of a JS, an MJS, a CJS, or a JSON, it'll basically reboot the server. And so that's awesome because index.js is the file that we're running. Now notice our JSON file. Let's talk about this. So I could go down here, our index.js. Maybe I'm going to change this to 3001, right? So I changed the port that we're running this on from 3000 to 3001. Notice I haven't saved. Remember on Visual Studio Code, that little dot right there means I haven't saved it. As I hit Control S, watch my terminal. I'm going to hit Control S. Restarting due to changes and server running on 3001. Right? I love NodeMon. NodeMon's great. I no longer have to manually kill my server and reboot it every time I make a save. Okay, so now you understand what NodeMon is. You install it one time, you just use it on every project. It is a great developer tool. Okay, let's go. Here. Okay. Let's talk about this. A node package manager. As you know, that these are different versions, right? Version Express 4, major version, minor version, and patches, right? So major version, minor version, and patches. This little caret means something. The descriptor, I'm going to draw to everyone's attention for the symbols that you'll find there. Okay, so let me go to this class really quick and pull up the right class. Don't pull up the wrong class. And in your node reading, you would have seen this if you got to the end. We get to Node Package Manager. NPM install NodeMon. Done that. Package JSON. Here's a complex package JSON file. You can see it gets much more complex than what we're at right now. We're going to talk about scripts here in a second. Package JSON lock. The quick version is you don't touch it. Don't touch it. Just let it be. Package JSON you can modify. Package JSON lock, as the name implies, it's locked. Don't touch it. It keeps track of a total version history of all the different packages that you've ever had. Right, so as you upgrade packages, because like, you know, oh, Express went from 4 to 5. Let's use the version 5. It'll keep track that you had version 4 initially and you upgraded to version 5. So it's just kind of like history of all the packages and all the versions you've ever used. Promises. I thought it was in here. It may be in the Express reading. No. Anyone got some hold music for me? Thank you. Callbacks. Talked about callbacks, asynchronous programming, building a server, package runner. Here it is. Just okay. This is called semantic versioning notation, semver for short, semantic versioning notation. Okay, so if you write a caret, it says you want to get the updates that do not change the major version. So you keep the major version the same. So I want you can update, if you do this and you run an update command, by the way, the update command, if you say you want to update your versions, we'll go over that command. But this will allow you to get patch and minor releases. So like if you're at 13.0, you're allowed to go to 13.1, and you're allowed to go to 14.0, and you're allowed to go to 15.0, and you're allowed to go to 16.0, all the way up to version 2. But it doesn't change the major. If you write this, it allows you to change any of these numbers and any of these numbers, but you don't change the major version. Okay, that's what the caret means. If you do tilde on it, it just allows for the patch releases. Okay, so this tilde means just patches. The caret means minor versions. And if you write 13.0, means you're not allowed to update it. Right, so that's the versioning notation is what this is called, semantic versioning. And so when you go here, when I look at my dependencies, by default, we're allowed to change the version 18 and the version 2, but not changing the major, which makes sense because changing major will cause things to break. Right, so that's generally what you'll see here in the in the dependencies. Okay. Back to my outline. So we've covered the npm init, we've covered npm install, we've covered the npm install -g, which is global. Let's talk about a developer dependency. So, back to Google, most popular NPM developer dependencies. Those are popular. I'm going to bring in a linter, right? So NPM JS lint. One second. Let me see. Don't install this one yet. Express config debug. There's also like ES lint. This one, 31 million versus JS lint. There's different linters. Again, a linter, yeah, that's not the one that we want. So ES lint, 31 million downloads. This is the one that we want. This linter will give us syntax errors as we're writing JavaScript, right? So as we're in Visual Studio Code, it'll point out some errors that we may have. Here's the homepage, eslint.org. Find and fix problems in your code. Yes?
Would it matter if, because on the setting up your station, ESLint was an extension to add into it. So does it matter if you have the extension on it?
Right, so you're saying that here on extensions, you already have a linter.
Yeah, I have an ESLint.
Yep, as do I.
Is there a need to download it?
And so, right, so the question is, this extension is enabled globally. I'm going to go through the activity. I don't know that this really provides any different code suggestions. I just wanted to go through and show you a dev dependency, which could be a linter. Now, temporarily, you could disable it just temporarily, just to, reload required. So let me go ahead and close that and reopen it. And now I've disabled my linter kind of that's already there. To go back to the docs, so there's npm I eslint, but eslint, this is a developer dependency. The difference between a developer dependency and a normal dependency is when you're in development, you want a linter to help you with your code. But you don't necessarily want that linter on the production server, right? You're not writing code actively when it's in production. So you don't need to copy the dependencies up to the server when you have a developer dependency. And so to bring this in, you do an npm I eslint, but then we're going to do a switch to save it as a developer dependency. So let's do this. So let's go back here. I'm going to paste in npm I eslint, and I'm going to do a switch, capital D. Right? So the global was a lowercase g, but the developer dependency is a capital D. I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to close my package JSON so that when I reopen it, notice this dev dependencies versus dependencies. Okay, again, this linter, I can configure this linter now. It's actually not running. To run this, let's go back to the docs and let's configure it. So we needed to install eslint, and then here we now need to run this command, npm init eslint config. So here's the command. Once we install the dev dependency, we then have to configure it. I'll come back and I'll run this npm init, and I just copy and paste that in. And it says it needs to install the packages. I'm going to hit yes. And now this is a little bit of, again, an interactivity mode. This first question is, how strict do you want your linter to be? You could check syntax only, check syntax and find problems, and enforce code style. I'm just going to choose this middle option to check syntax and find problems. What kind of modules? We're using JS modules, import or export. Which framework do we use? Well, eventually we're going to use React, but right now I'm saying none of these. Do you use TypeScript? I can hit left and right arrow keys. I'm going to say no. And we're going to run the browser. We're going to run your code in the browser. And I'm going to say I want my config file to be in JavaScript. Okay, and here it made this config file. Now that linter should be active, and if I start writing some bad JavaScript, I should get some IntelliSense here. Let me maybe do a const data semicolon, and now this should be my linter kind of saying, hey, you have to initialize your variable. You just can't have a const that's not initialized. And maybe now I get a suggested fix, which if I hit control dot, it might give me a suggested fix, but really this one didn't give me a suggested fix. But that's your linter, right?
I think it's because there's another setting you have to do. Because on the configuration it says you'll see some rules configured like this for settling the quotes, but on the actual configuration file, there's nothing in the rules section.
Right. I just wanted to the main thing here, and I'm gonna enable my extension back in here. I just wanted to discuss the difference between a dependency, which is copied up to the server, and a dev dependency, which is just a dependency you use while you're writing code.
So what did the init thing we just do? Like, what did it even do exactly?
What did the init thing that we just did? This one right here, npm init ESLint. That just helped us configure the settings for our linter.
Oh, okay.
Okay? That helped us configure the settings for our linter. Now again, I kind of want my linter re-enabled back in here, so I'm going to go back into here, find ESLint right here, click on the gear. I'm going to enable this extension and delete that dummy variable. Okay. Okay, we've talked about NodeMon. We've talked about the Express package. Let's bring in debug. Before I do that, before I bring in debug, let's talk about scripts. Scripts, we're gonna write two scripts, and basically this is gonna allow us to run our code in two different ways. Right now, let me clear the screen. Clear screen. Okay. So remember, we've got Node and we've got NodeMon, right? We know the difference. Node, if you run Node, you got to manually reboot your server every time. If you say NodeMon, you don't, right? So those are the two commands that we have to run our Express server. I'm going to put one of those in a comma. I'm going to say just like that. I'm going to make a script called start, and it's going to run the node command index.js. I'm going to make another script called start-dev, and that's going to run NodeMon. So if I run the start script, it runs the node command. If I run the start dev script, it's going to run NodeMon. I'm just going to type in my terminal. I'm going to save that. I'm going to type in NPM. And notice to run a script named foo, I need to run the npm run command. So if I say npm run, and then the name of my script, start. Notice this is just running the node command, to run index.js. That ran my script. Okay, I'm gonna hit Control-C to stop and hit yes to terminate the batch job. Now I'm gonna type npm run start-dev. This is gonna run my start dev script, which is node mod. Notice it's now running node mod. Okay, so to run my scripts, I have to run the npm run command, and then the name of the script. I'm going to hit Control-C to stop node mod. I'm going to clear my screen. If I just say npm start-dev, okay, doesn't work. You have to have npm run. Okay, it says, did you mean this? npm run start dev to run. There you go. So you have to type npm run start-dev, and that gets nodemon going. It's common to have different scripts, you know, because you might tell your server to run the start script, but when you're in a development environment, you tell it to run the start dev script. All right, I just got pinged a message. Why don't you guys take 10 more minutes on a break and we'll continue this. Okay, so after a break, we've talked a little bit about routing. We know that this is back-end routing. There's also front-end routing. And right now we've got 2 routes. We're gonna be doing more with routing as we go on. We also talked about middleware just being functions that execute between client and server response. And then there's a third thing, which is like your front end templating or your view engine. There's a little bit of code that we can write that offers up a static HTML file. So here's the short version of this. We're gonna learn React like in a, you know, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 weeks, like later on, maybe the halfway point of the semester, we're gonna get back into React. And React is gonna be our front end. So when we're talking about a view engine, we're talking about the front end. And there's a lot of ways to implement different front ends. React is a really popular one. Angular is another popular front end. But we can also just serve some static files. And so here, and I'm gonna see, I've got the code for this. Static files typically use a public folder. And so there's a couple of things here. And app.use express static. Now let's go to the docs. Let's go to the docs. And by the docs, I mean the Express docs. So I'm gonna go to npm.js. I'm gonna search Express. And I'm gonna go to Express.js.com. And if I go to getting started, static files. And so you can see here, express.use static public. For example, you can use the following code to serve up images CSS in a directory named public. It said just by adding app.use express static public, which is the code that we wrote. Okay. By the way, when you see app.use is used to mount middleware. So app.use is kind of installing like a global middleware. This allows us to now have a new folder called public. And inside of public, let's just make a hello.htm, where we do a little h1 hello world. And notice every time I'm making changes here, kind of NodeMon is rebooting. And now I should be able to go to /home.htm. Let's see, hello.htm. And we get hello world, which is allowing us to serve up a static file. And so this causes some confusion. I see James asking a question like, what is the difference between now just going to /, right, this backend versus this static front end? Okay, in a real world scenario, our backend right here, these backend routes serve up dynamic information. Okay, so these backend routes would probably, hit a database based on some search information or whatever and serve up dynamic information, whereas this hello HTM is always going to be static. Okay, so we have static files versus kind of dynamic routes. James, is that what your question kind of was? Like, then what's the difference between these routes, which are backend routes that serve up typically dynamic information, and these are just static HTML files?
So are you saying like the back end would give like the front end,
The front end would end up calling the back end to get data and making the front end more dynamic. But in the reality, like, we're not going to do a whole lot of this where we're serving up static HTML files. We're going to use React and everything's going to be dynamic. So like in reality, we're not going to be doing that. We're not going to use this very much. Okay. Now you can on this, you could link to something here, right? So if I just create like a hyperlink, let's just create a link to go to /home. Let's see where that. And so if I click on that, notice that link does take me to the backend route. So these two things can like work nice together. But again, we're not going to do a ton of this, but I just wanted to show you how to kind of serve up some static HTML. Yes.
I'm getting an error saying NodeMon app crashed.
Okay.
Looking for files.
So again, I just wanted to kind of show this because I did talk about like a templating or view engine, and really what that is a front end. And we're not going to do a whole lot with that right now because that's what we'll use React for. For the time being, we're going to focus on the back end. Okay, so like if I had to add to this, I'll say we will use React for this. How about it? We got some crazy listening to me going on. All right. Which, by the way, this could be a Bootstrap site, right? Bootstrap here, and all the normal Bootstrap stuff applies. So now if I go to localhost and I go to /hello.htm, we've got a Bootstrap site.
why is it HTML and not HTML?
Because both are valid. 3-letter extensions have been around longer, so I find older servers play nicer with 3-letter extensions instead of 4. but HTML is completely valid. It's just a preference of mine because I've had some conflicts with 4-letter extensions.
Alright, so it doesn't actually matter.
Doesn't actually matter. Unless the server you push to only supports one or the other. Okay, back to this here. Just kind of reading through this documentation. It does say, let's see. Here we're using static, so we could have a static folder. It says, however, the path that you provide to the express static function is relative to the directory from where you launch your node process. Okay. I don't think we need to mess with that. We're actually, that's if you want to have a prefix of /static to all your resources, which we don't. Okay. Back to the lecture notes. We've talked about routing, we've talked about middleware, we've talked about a view template engine. Now we're going to talk about Postman. Postman. Postman has this little icon down here. Everyone see where my mouse is? Right? This is a desktop app. It is also a web app, but I'm going to have all of you download the desktop app. So go to Google, do a Google search for Postman, Postman. I might pronounce it Postman, but it is correctly pronounced Postman. Okay, go ahead and download Postman desktop app, right? Postman download. Okay, we're gonna go to download Postman, get started for free. Download Windows 64-bit, whatever version of Windows you may have, 32-bit. Okay, download it, install it, open it, and we will continue. Once you download and install Postman, you're going to come to a sign-in page. You're going to need to register. You know, you can register under your personal Gmail or what have you. We'll talk about this tool in just a minute. So upon opening Postman, now let me, your home page will kind of get to something like this. So your workspace is going to look something like this. New tool, so I'm going to kind of walk you through this tool. But you should have a place called My Workspace when you're there. And notice I got a bunch of folders already here. I've got this thing over here. I'm just going to delete that because I don't need it. Delete. Okay, so let's talk about Postman. What is Postman? Postman is a tool to test your backends a lot easier than working with a browser. So a browser is obviously a front end, and in order to, for example, in order to post something to a backend, you would need to wire up an HTML web form. You need to make a submit button. You would need to, kind of link everything together, and that would be a process. And it's a doable process, but it's a process. So Postman is a browser on steroids in its own way, because you don't have to mock up a dummy HTML file to do a post using Postman, or to do a put request, or to do a delete request. Like, you can just use this tool to work with your backend. Okay, so we have a backend running. I think everyone, if you're running NodeMon, you should have localhost port 3000. Okay, and I've kind of demonstrated how you can use the front end to kind of view what's going on. But we're going to use Postman to work with our back end and to test our back end. Okay, so again, I think of Postman, like the easiest way I think of Postman is kind of like a browser on steroids. It can do everything that a browser can do, just do it a lot easier, and you don't have to mock up a bunch of HTML to do it. And so it kind of all starts with the collection. Now over here you can see I've got a bunch of collections. These collections are essentially folders, if you will, okay, where I kind of save my Postman requests. Okay, now it's good to stay organized, right? So a collection is just a folder for organizational purposes. Let's go ahead and everyone create a collection. So create a new collection, and I'm just going to delete my hello world. Okay, so I'm going to create a new collection here. This is a plus button, and this collection will be called Hello Postman. Is it a capital M? No, it's not. Hello Postman. Okay, so we've got a little folder here that allows me to kind of organize our requests. So if you kind of expand it, this collection is empty. Click Add Request to start working. So I click Add Request, and it opens up a file with a default name of New Request. We're going to name that something different. So this is going to be the URL that we would type in a browser, right? So what URL are we working with? Well, right now it's http://localhost:3001. And if you click send, notice we get some data back. Username, age, so on and so forth. You can see we're using Postman to replace our browser to test our backend. Again, because it's a better tool for testing your backend. Okay, and you'll see as we dive in why that is the case. Okay, now I would not call this new request. I'm actually going to name this something useful. So I'm just going to say home route, something like that, home route. And notice how it saves my GET request. So I can close this. By the way, the dot means it's not saved, so I'll hit Control S. The dot goes away. You know, Control Save, right? So I can close this and reopen it up and then run it, and it gives me our data back, right? Close it, open it back up, so on and so forth. Okay, so, well, we have another route, right? So maybe we click this plus symbol right here. We're going to call this the about route, and it's going to be http://local host:3001, I believe, /about. Notice over here this drop down, these are our different HTTP methods. So how easy it is to do a post, or how easy it is to do a get, to do a delete. You know, these are different methods in HTTP, which the client determines the method. But for right now, we did a get. Now I just want to point out, this is our get request for the home, and this is the get request for /about. Right, so again, I'm wiring this up, and if I send, you know, I get back just the string, the about page. Okay, now notice this name is not very good. When I go to hit Control S on this, I can change my request name. I'll say get about route, you know, or I'll just even call it about route. And it doesn't know, for whatever reason, it doesn't want to put it in my Hello Postman. I'm going to say save it in my Hello Postman collection. So now I've got my home route and I've got my about route. And I can just, again, test these routes by clicking send on Postman. And this is just an introduction to Postman. I just wanted to download the tool, install the tool, use it, basic, and then we will elaborate on that, on this tool. On the reading, there are a whole bunch of tutorials on how to use Postman, but basically if you're following along on my lectures, you're going to learn Postman. Okay, so for right now, we don't need to go too deep. Just download, install the tool. I probably would pin it on my taskbar. That way you can just close it and open it back up. And it remembers what you had open, what you had closed, so on and so forth. Any questions about Postman? Back to the lecture notes. Talk about status codes. Everyone knows the status code 404. What does the HTTP 404 mean? Not found, right? Resource not found. Everyone heard of the 404 error? Turns out there's a bunch of status codes. And broadly speaking, they come in categories. So all these numbers have a category implementation. And so broadly speaking, the 200 range is considered a success. So when you have a successful response, you would say the status code is 200, right? So if the client requests a resource and they get it back, basically it worked, the resource that they wanted was sent back from the server, you would send back a status code of 200. Okay, now what you can do here on both of these, we could add a status, .status 200. Okay, these are optional status codes, but we do a .status 200 on both of these to say, hey, you know, the client asked for a resource, the server sent back what it's supposed to. Bless you. Now if we look at this in Postman, and I hit my home route, bless you, you actually see the little status code right there. The status says, hey, you got a good response back. Okay? Of course, there are plenty of conditions where you're not going to get a good status code back. And that might fall under maybe a client 404. The resource you requested is not a valid resource. Like, hey, the server doesn't have that resource. For whatever reason, it's not there. The server crashed. Status code of 500. In other words, you know, exception was not handled, right? You guys are familiar with exceptions causing your application to crash. So if there's a server-side error that causes an exception and you don't catch that exception, you might send back a status code of 500, 501, 502, so on and so forth. If you get a redirection message like, hey, you wanted this old URL, but we're redirecting you to a different URL, it might be in the category 300. But broadly speaking, like the important things to internalize, 200s means good, 400s means client error, 500s means server errors. They do get more detailed than that, and we will get more detailed than that when needed. But broadly speaking, that's where that's where the comprehension starts. Okay. Let me show you how to use a variable on a route. Except an ID parameter. Okay, a couple things going on here, and I'm going to explain. This is not the only code that we need to write. Notice we are creating a new route with an optional ID. Okay. Where you put this, notice this actually matters. I'm gonna demonstrate this. Where you put this in the hierarchy, we have 3 routes right now. We've got a home route, we've got the home route with an optional ID, and we've got an about route. Okay, and so we're gonna pass a value in the URL. We're going to pass some sort of ID, like the number 1234, to the back end, and then we're going to send that back to the client. We're going to say, hey, the ID you specified, it came in. Remember the rec. What does rec represent? Rec represents request. It's the request object. Request object comes from the client. So we need to, when data comes from the client, it comes in via the request object. The params property, request params, and then these match. The name ID here matches ID right here. So the request object params ID matches the what comes after the colon. Now, in order to accept parameters from a client via the URL, I think oh, maybe this is it. Maybe I don't. I'm thinking of something else. Yeah, I'm thinking of something else. Okay, so let's just write this one little bit of code. And again, this is basically a variable. This is a parameter variable. Okay, it's a variable because the data you put into it can vary. Let's go back here to Postman, and let's make a new request. Okay. Now notice you can click that plus button here, or maybe if I want to automatically add it to this collection, I'm going to add a request here. That way it automatically puts it in there. I like that a little bit better. And I'll just say ID param, and I'll do here HTTP localhost 3001. I send that. I'm still getting that. /1234. And you can see it says the ID you specified is 1234. Okay, so I just sent via the URL, I sent a piece of data, a parameter, into the back end, and then what could I do? Oh, I could look up a user ID out of the database and then return the username and password. Return, the welcome screen to the user. Welcome, Jimmy. Now the order this matters. Now check this out. The reason this order matters, look at that. The ID you specified is about. My about route is now being interpreted as the word about is being interpreted as a variable. So I wanted this route to be hit, but it's interpreting what's coming after the slash as a variable, and it's hitting this route instead. So the rule of thumb is that the order of the routes matter. You must place routes without parameters first. I mean parameter variables first. So this is fixed simply by cutting this route and pasting it above here. Okay, now if I kind of go back here, if I click on about, it takes me to the about page. But if I go back here and I say 1, 2, 3, 4, the IC ID specified as 1, 2, 3, 4. Now our routes are all working nicely together. Okay, this is pretty much all the lecture notes that I had. Okay, so this is the end of we'll call this lecture part 1. There is a lecture part 2 that I'm going to, and I mentioned this, on break, so some of you heard this. The reason we had so much time originally and I tried to shift it is because there's actually 2 parts to this lecture. There's like what we just went through, part 1, and then there's a part 2, which is another coding demo. Okay, so we have another coding demo that I'm going to do tomorrow, and then we'll do a lab. Okay, so there's more lecture to come. I'm going to stop the recording here.